I like it.
All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Give me a second here to let it carry over to Instagram so I can click go live over here. Usually takes a minute or so to kick over. There it goes. Excellent. All right. Excited to have everybody here with us. I have wonderful guest Christina, who will be sharing who she is and what she does in one moment, and then we'll have a discussion and see what unfolds. But I do want to take time to thank everybody for joining us, whether you're joining us live, whether you're watching this recorded. I am always grateful for you taking part of your day to listen to the conversations. And I'm always confident that something is going to get said that's going to resonate with at least one person. And that excites me very much because I believe that connection can create incredible impact in this world. So with that said, Christina, thank you so much for being here. And why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, Deb, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. For everyone who's tuning in, I'm just grateful that you're sharing your most precious resource with us, your time. So I'm Christina Deering. I am a shaman and business intuitive. And so I help entrepreneurs build businesses that are in alignment with their soul so that it can scale, so that it's maintainable, and so that it excites you every single day. And so that's a little bit about me. I love talking about all things wealth energetics, soul aligned selling, things of that nature, because I think a lot of people think of selling as like something that doesn't feel good in your body, and it should feel like one of the deepest things that you can do for humanity. And so I just love kind of turning it on its head and talking about how powerful sales really can be to deeply impact humanity the way that so many entrepreneurs want to do. So that's just a little bit about me. I have a 3-year-old son. We all live here in Texas and just absolutely love my job and being a mom and kind of balancing the two of those together.
Yeah. And I mean, I can attest from having kind of been with, well, not kind of, having been with you in person, right? How passionate you are about that, because I think the way that you were just describing it was really neat too, because it was succinct and clear, because we do struggle with that as entrepreneurs, and not just entrepreneurs. I think many businesses struggle with that, the concept of sales and how do you balance wanting to get people to purchase your product and making sure it's the right people that are purchasing your product and not just anybody. And what you said about the gift that you can give people, that's so true, is that when we believe in what we're doing, which you would hope people would do, they believe in their product, their service, etc. You want to be able to bring that to people. And in order for you to sustain your product and your service, there's an exchange, income for your product or service, which the person is served by what you're giving them. You're served by the income in order to be able to keep perpetuating your momentum forward. So there's that piece there. What made you get so interested in that? Because there's a lot of different things you do, but I know that you've been very helpful to people in getting them past the blockers that allow them to sell effectively and with emotion behind it. Where was the appeal for that for you?
Yeah. So there are just so many people that have these gifts inside of them that are just like, I know that I'm meant to give this back into humanity. And they have all these blocks around, well, is it wrong? Should I give it away for free? Am I allowed to, there's all these stories that they've made up, myself included. When I first started in business, I'm like, wait, I know I'm supposed to be doing this. Why does this feel so hard? Why do I feel like I'm inconveniencing people? Why am I making up these stories that are not supporting anyone? And then I just started studying it. I started connecting to my soul as well about like, what does it feel like, cause I will say it was some trial and error too, where I was like trying on some sales strategies from coaches and being like, that didn't feel good. This doesn't feel like me. Cold DMing people, stuff like that, where I was like, I would do it. And then I'd be like, that just like doesn't feel aligned with me. I want it to be like a real connection, human to human. And so I just started really connecting into, well, what is sales really? What is money really? Money is just energy. It's all just energy. And so in order, like you think about the way that it works is like, if you've ever signed up for a free masterclass, like you might go or you might not. Like your energy is not really in it. All you did is type in your name and your email, right? But then if you paid $10,000 to go to this in-person event and you got VIP, like you will be there. You'll be there early. You'll be there networking. You'll be connecting with the people that are there, and you'll be taking notes and like really receiving the medicine from that experience. And so I think there's something to be said about the energy that we put into something as a consumer is what we're going to be getting out of something, because it's just energy. And so the beauty about the person who's also doing the service or providing the service is when they are then receiving the energy from someone else, they can fully drop in with both feet and serve to the highest capacity that their soul desires to do. So it really is this powerful energetic exchange, instead of being like, well, if I give it away for free, then I'm also doing this full-time job and I feel like I'm kind of doing this splits and then my child's pulling me here. It's like, it's not maintainable, and it's not something that we can scale. And it is like one of the highest things that we can do when we think about how to really like give into society, how to give back into the world, is like to be able to give our gifts to back into the world, but also to be able to be compensated for those so that we can pay other people for their gifts.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well said. I mean, it's an exchange, right? Like you're talking about it. It's an exchange, and there's a commitment that takes place in that act. And I love that you use that analogy because it's so true. And in having conversations with people, I've never met a person who didn't nod fervently when using that type of example. When you give money to something, it does make you have another level of commitment. And there's a commitment between both of you. There's a contract when you make that exchange. Here's my service. Here's my product. Here's the finance. And then sometimes people will exchange services. Like I'll do this service for you and you do this service for me. And it's the same concept, but it's that connection point in realizing that it's bringing something forward. And a couple things that you were talking about that I think that this would kind of be an interesting place to kind of go in the conversation is, number one, when doing that, it doesn't mean that you're never going to do anything that it doesn't mean like you have to, every time you do something, there has to be some type of financial compensation, right? Whether it's a bartering of services or you're doing something for somebody out of an act of charity, and you know that person's going to help, you're putting that into the world. We're all part of this world together. We're connected. So helping others helps ourselves. So there is that. But also that the exchange of gifts for something else, exchange of your gift, is an act of service, like you noted, even though there is compensation. And I think sometimes people get thinking that, well, I'm a person who really thinks it's important to do acts of service. Therefore, I have to do things like I have to have a certain amount of things I'm doing for free. It becomes not sustainable. You noted yourself, I've gotten caught up in that sometimes, right? We have a heart to really help people, but we do have to step back and think of the big picture, because if we burn ourselves out, we're not going to be helping anybody. And whether that's burning ourselves out as a parent, as an employee, as an entrepreneur, we have to be aware of making sure we're looking at the impacts that we're going to have on overdoing it. Now, were you so kind of in that realm, because you're very passionate about what you do. Can you like look back at childhood and kind of see the ways this was already forming and growing in you? And you think like, oh, that's why I loved that as a kid. And that's why those people said that. Do you see that? That like kind of that wanting to promote the service component and how it's going to be able to be perpetuated?
Oh yeah. It's so funny because a lot of people that are trying to figure out what they want to do for a living too, people find themselves, they've checked all the boxes. They're in, let's say, corporate America or whatever, wherever they've landed. And then let's say they're starting to feel a little bit empty from the job that they're doing. One of the pieces of advice that I give people when they're starting to kind of connect back into their soul and really say like, what would light me up in this moment? What would be something that excites me, even as a passion project, you know? And so I think back to when I was a kid, just like you were noting, and it's like, I was always teaching. Like I always had my teddy bears like set up, and I'd be like standing in front of them and like teaching, and I'd put like little fake nails on and be like, like pointing at things, you know, but it's like, now I think, and I'm like, oh my gosh, of course, like so much of what I do is guiding and healing and, you know, leaning into all these spaces. But there was also the teaching element, but I was also, you know, the person that people went to when they needed a safe place to land, when they were feeling sad or confused, and found myself to be like a mediator a lot of times too, which was interesting. So I will say there was a lot of what I'm doing now that I did do when I was younger, even singing. Like I love singing. And so there's parts of now I think about how I use my voice as a tool for healing. Like I'm relaying messages that are deeply kind of like resonating with people's souls because I'm channeling them, that allow them to almost like find the messages within themselves. So if I'm channeling a message, I share it, someone's going to know in their body, ooh, yeah, that's mine. There's just like this settling in feeling where it's like, yeah, that feels true for me. And so to use my voice in that way has been something that's been so exciting. And I just think about, you know, the visions that I had when I was younger and seeing them come true. And it's like, wow, we really can live our passion and purpose and make money doing it too.
Yeah, I was a teacher as well as a kid, and then that carried on
Yeah.
actually. You know, like I can remember when I was little, like I had first joined the little league team and I was like in first or second grade, whenever you first start. And like some of the kids used to joke around and call me coach because I was always like trying to help people out and motivate people. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think that desire to see people use their gifts in the best way possible. And
Yeah.
for me, every day when I wake up, one of the first things I pray to God for is that I'm going to do honor to the gifts He gave me. That
Mm.
today I do the honor to the gifts that you give me. And one of the gifts that I think that I have is to help other people see their gifts. And so I
Mhm.
think that's the teaching component.
Yeah.
And when I transitioned from education into full-time business consulting, which had not been the plan, life circumstances just happened. I wasn't opposed to it. There was no way I would have plotted the course that I took. It was just
Mhm.
there and it happened. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm an English teacher. I was 11th grade English teacher. And now I'm like in the business world consulting at a
Yeah.
financial services company. So it was
Mm.
really very far off from what I thought, right?
Mhm.
But then, you know, you step back and I would realize like all of these skills that I was using as a teacher for 11th graders were
Yes.
very much relevant in doing operations and marketing strategy at a financial services firm because it
Yes.
all has to do with communication and it has to do with teaching and has to do with helping people to recognize what resources they have so they can use them. So
Yeah.
whether you're helping a student realize that they can write a great essay or you're helping an adult realize that they can have a sales deal, right? It's
Mhm.
helping people realize and recognize what they already have within them that they don't even need to learn or acquire in order to be successful. Then, you know, learn as much as you possibly can, but for a start. So that really that
Mm.
part of being the educator with the teddy bears. I mean anything, animals, teddy bears, people that were
Yes.
standing around, yeah,
Yes.
like deliver that education. So we knew, right? We knew
Yeah.
as children that we had something within us that was going to help other people to be motivated
Yeah.
and recognize themselves. And
Mhm.
um but we had to get out of our own way a few times, didn't we?
Absolutely. Yeah,
So what were
that's
some Oh, go ahead.
no, keep going.
I was just gonna say, well, I'm kind of curious for you. What were some of the things that you think where you got not got in your own way, but obstacles you had to work through to really get to recognizing and embracing that you had a talent that was going to help other people?
Yeah, so there was so much, there was a lot around, and this is probably why I teach on wealth energetics, but there was a lot of money stories when I was younger, where it was like, it felt like when we were younger, it was selfish to ask for things. That was kind of
Mm,
the narrative that was being played out. And so it was like, oh, I'm not allowed to ask for things. It's selfish if I do something like that. So there were these stories that I in this lifetime, and we can go beyond that depending on how woo your audience is. But it's this idea of like what I really connected to was like there were stories that were playing out unconsciously that until I really stepped in with another healer and with, potentially a life coach. But really, I will say when I stepped in with a healer, that was when things started to really shift for me because we weren't just talking about things that I consciously knew. We were moving energy in the unconscious. And so those were some of the stories that were playing out. I had an abusive nanny too. And I think there was a big part about like, can I speak my truth? Is it okay? Am I allowed
right.
to, And so that was a big thing that I had to break through too around it's safe to speak my truth. Like I'm allowed to speak my truth. There's safety in that. So really cultivating a calm nervous system and healing those stories, healing the energy around what was keeping me stuck and had the fear of success around. And so through that, I was able to kind of break through that to really, because one of my mentors says it's just a subtraction problem. We're born worthy. Like we're not questioning
Mm.
whether someone's going to feed us or wipe our butt. Like, and we haven't done anything yet. We just came out of the womb. And so it's like everything else we're just meant to subtract to get back to our innate worthiness that's already there.
Mm.
So it's just subtracting everything else.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's a beautiful. I've heard it said similarly, but not quite like that. And I think
Mhm.
that is true. And also recognizing. So you were talking about like the money stories because we all have things that happen to us in childhood that tell us stories that can be. I think they can all be beneficial, whether the messages were negative or positive at the time or when we look back at them. I think we can use them in a beneficial way because we can say like, okay, that taught me this.
Mhm.
But we do have to really pause sometimes to think about why we think something is a certain way. What is it attached to? And we don't
Yeah.
need to go back and live in that childhood moment if it was something
Right.
negative that happened. It doesn't mean you
Mhm.
have to spend a whole lot of time kind of sitting in there and feeling the badness that you felt at that time. But when you
Yes.
look back and you go like, "Oh, I'm afraid to do this because, like you just noted, I was taught either directly or indirectly that it's selfish to ask for money. Is it
Mhm.
selfish to ask for? And it
Right.
reminds me, I remember being with my kids somewhere, I don't remember, at a store, right? And they were asking for things. And then they were like, they go in and out of phases as kids. They go out of phases where they like ask for everything, and then they're in a phase where they don't want to ask for anything.
Yeah.
And they were like apologizing because they were asking for stuff. And I was like, you can ask for stuff. Like, that's not an issue. I said, you do have to accept that sometimes the answer is no, right? But
Mhm.
that doesn't mean you don't ask for it. And I think like that is an important thing that we need to be mindful of in our lives, that we
Mm.
can't associate the fact that when we ask for something, sometimes we get a no, doesn't mean that we shouldn't have asked to begin with. Because
Exactly.
you might be getting a yes to something you don't even know, or that no might be perpetuating a momentum in a direction that you couldn't have otherwise gotten yourself on. So there's a lot of different things, as long as we're mindful and respectful, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't walk up to somebody and be like, give me your car. That's called grand theft. But like, if you
Correct.
but
Yes.
and I like, and
Mhm.
I've that's been a thing that I still work on daily. I mean, I still do that. Like, I remembered we were somewhere in an event, and I asked somebody for something, and kind of joking, but then they gave it to me.
Yeah.
And like, I wasn't really asking, and they gave it to me. And then I was like, inside of me, all this guilt was I'm like, oh my gosh, they
Mhm.
just gave me this thing. And
Yeah.
somebody with me was like, no, like, that's how things happen. You ask. Like, the person has the right to say no, and you didn't do anything disrespectful.
Yeah.
So I feel you. That's a big thing. And I think that when you or I or any other people that are coaching people in the business sense, that's what we're trying to help people to understand. Not that you're going to march forward into the world in a ruthless, disrespectful, everything is about me way, but
No.
that you are going to acknowledge the things that you desire in a meaningful and respectful way, because it could be beneficial to the good of all.
Yes, exactly. It's how can I be of service to humanity? And that is what sales is like, let yourself, like, we were given these gifts for a reason. Let yourself be of service. Give them back to people, into humanity. And you're allowed to receive financial compensation for it. But really what it is just energy. Like back in the day it was cocoa beans. Now we just look at cocoa beans, we're like, cool, whatever. But back in the day it was like, oh, my cocoa beans. And it's
Right.
like, it's so funny because you think about money, it's just dirty paper and numbers on a screen. And it's like, but we attach all this energy to it and it's not needed. Like, it's like you look at a number, just a regular number, and then you add a dollar sign before it, and all these new stories come into play. And it's like just
Mm,
recognizing those. And I think really a big thing is calming your nervous system around, like, especially for entrepreneurs, if you're pricing your service at something, get your body on board with it. Calm your nervous system around that so that when you are sharing the price, it feels normal. It feels like I'm connected to the value of that. That feels really in alignment with me, because people buy based on energy too. So I think about the example too of someone's like giving you something for free, but they're like, there's toxic chemicals in this, like whatever, like toothpaste, and they're like trying to give it to you. And you're like, even if it's free, I don't know, like, I don't want it. Like, there's something weird about this. It's all energy. And so, but if we're like, oh, this is going to deeply transform the people that step into this space, I'm so grateful that whoever is meant to be in this space will land here. If we leave it up to God too, it's like God controls my income, not people. Then we start to
mm,
like deeply connect with people, and we're not taking it personally if someone's not ready to step in or this isn't the right portal for them. It doesn't matter. God's controlling your income,
right.
and then people that are meant to step in to co-create with you in that space and receive something beautiful will.
Yeah, I love what you said about the stepping away from the fact that we have the control, because there's the good type of control, which is I can choose to do things, right? So there's
Mhm.
that choice. That's a type
Yeah.
of control. It's a power that we were given from birth to be able to kind of make those choices. But then there's
Mhm.
the control that we assign ourselves over things that we don't, right?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of guilt comes in, because when something happens, well, it must be because I did this, right? And we give ourselves this responsibility for things that we cannot control, whether
Mhm.
that's somebody else's actions or something negative happening to us, etc. And I actually was talking to my husband this morning. So it's funny that you just said that. I said something like, oh, sometimes I feel like I'm getting in God's way. And then I chuckled and I'm like, I'm getting in God's way. Like, that's a funny statement. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
getting in God's way. There's no
Right.
way I'm going to get in his way.
Right.
But we
Yeah.
do, we do think like that. And I was glad I caught myself, because even though I was laughing, you say those things out loud, you hear those things. And even when you're like, oh, I didn't mean it, if you say those things on a repeated basis, it's just like if you listen to a song that's got really negative song lyrics in it day after day after day,
Mhm.
you're going to feel that. You're
Yeah.
going to feel what we say and what we listen to. And so it is really important to be mindful. So like you were saying that, like acknowledging this is, I'm not in control of this situation. So I
Mhm.
need to be more receptive and be open to receiving those things.
Absolutely. Yeah, just it's that beautiful like masculine and feminine energy where it's like, go after the thing that you want and surrender and trust that it's going to come to
Mm.
you what's in alignment with your soul versus trying to push and like receive. And it's like that energy, we're meant to find that beautiful delicate balance between like follow what lights you up, and the people that, like a lighthouse, the people that are meant to be with you will travel towards your light, right? So follow what lights you up, and your people that are meant to like be with you, work with you,
Mm.
lean in. You're the lighthouse. Now they know where to go, where to find you. So you're magnetizing them in because you're just simply being you and following what lights you up.
Yeah, that's a wonderful analogy, and absolutely, and that just ties in with what you're saying too about the selling, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you've got to put the offer out there in order for people to see the lighthouse. They're not gonna see it if you don't shine it. And
Mhm.
speaking of shining, so I want to talk a little bit about your Forbes article, just because, like, I saw it pop up on social media, and then I went. I mean, and you just are like so radiant and so calm, and like so much peace about you in that picture,
Mhm.
and I know that you've got a lot of excitement about it. So what's going on in that picture that's bringing you that smile? Was it the because the picture's from before the Forbes article, right? That was the
Mhm.
picture that ended up being used, but you're very present in that picture. So I'm just curious to hear you talk about like what the moment was like when that picture was being taken, and then how it was to see that be part of this Forbes article.
Yeah. So talk about following what lights you up. That was that whole day. It was really fun because I think about the photo shoot, and there was energy behind all of it. I thought about the energy of each of the different looks and what I really wanted to convey and step into. And so I had all these different looks that like I was really connecting to, like, what message do I want this to convey though? Like that's me. That's like so authentically me that again you become that lighthouse that then magnetizes in other people that are like, yeah, I want to play with that energy. Because when we look at someone else, it's just about like we're just witnessing energy, and we're witnessing what we want to dial up versus turn down. Like there might be
Mm.
some people where we're like, ooh, that's not working for me. Let me just turn down that energy within myself. Versus there's other energy where like you're magnetized towards someone where you're just like, I want to dial that up within myself. That feels good. So I was just kind of playing with the dials of the different looks and the different energetics behind it. And I will say, like, for me, when I was just so dropped in, it felt so good to be in that space of just like, you know, having the looks be so having the energy just be so me. Like I know like my husband was looking at some of the outfits and like some of the things I was wearing and he was like, "No. Like you can't wear that. Like that's crazy." And I remember being like, "You know what? I don't care and I love you." Like I love you so much and I really don't care because I'm just being so authentically me. It's just lighting me up. So I think that coupled with just like grounding before the day, just really wanting to be present, working with someone that I felt really deeply connected to, like there was just so much of me that was placed into that space where when I walked in, it was just like, like an exhale. Like it just feels so good to be here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally does.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, historically, I mean, when you're younger, right, and people take your picture, you're just present, you're in the picture, and then you kind of go through the period where you're a little more awkward, and
Mhm.
then I feel like as I got older, I started to be more comfortable with like, okay, I'm me. But then then you get into a different setting, and it's like, oh, this is different. How do I pose for this picture? So like, there's a lot, like as you're talking about, there's a lot that goes into how am I going to enjoy this moment? Because for me, I've always loved photography just as a form
Mm.
of art, because I think that you can take a moment and you can capture it in a way that people can look at it and they can feel the emotion that you felt in the moment because of the angle, how much light you let in or don't let in. And I think that's the same thing with portrait photography. So I did photography for a while, and it was interesting to me how like a tilt of the camera, having person raise their head, put their head down or raise their head up, like just creates a very different emotion to that.
Yeah.
And so it's for you as the subject of the photography, you're in that experience of your who you want to be being captured in a way that other people are going to look at. And you know that because that's the purpose of a picture, is that people are going to look at it. Right. So I can imagine you picking those things and thinking about how they make you feel for the experience and how other people are going to feel when they're looking at them. And I mean, from what I saw on social media, I mean, people were loving it. Right. So, I mean, you were getting a lot of people who were like, oh, that's incredible. So that totally makes sense. And sometimes I think it's hard for people, even for me, when I see an outfit laid out on the bed, I'm like, that is not going to look good on me. And then I put it on and I'm like, oh, actually it does. So like, I get your husband kind of looking at it like, I don't know about that.
Totally. Like, that's a no for me. I'm like, well, cool. You're not the subject of the photo shoot then. Like whatever.
But I bet he sees it now and he's like, oh, I get it. I see it.
Yeah.
I see it.
Yes. Yeah.
Totally. So, yeah, that's really cool. So Forbes, right? We know, and we were talking briefly before the call, and it's something that I have started talking more openly about because I think it's important. How, when you get media coverage, it does change the way that people recognize and look at the work that you've been doing, even if it's work that you've been doing for a long time, right? There's a lot of different media logos out there, but when you start to collect those media logos in terms of being able to display them, people are like, okay, a source that, vets its people that are going to contribute as experts, says this person is an expert. So it has some meaning behind it. Even if nothing that you've done has changed in the week, right? It's you've got that media logo. And of media logos, Forbes is a big one. I think a lot of people recognize Forbes as, particularly in the business world, they've got some, high credentials of who they do and do not want to feature and have information about, because they want to make sure that the people that are represented, they know that they're going to have an audience that's going to be reaching out to them and stuff. So when you get that Forbes thing, that's a really cool, like, that's okay, that like Forbes is saying it and people are going to see me and they're going to associate with that Forbes thing. Has that for you? I mean, maybe you just already knew your awesomeness and it was like, or have you felt kind of the impact of that whole Forbes piece?
Yeah. It's funny. It's kind of like, it's twofold. I will say there's energy attached to the experience. So it does kind of invite you into stepping into that future version of yourself. Right. So there's that part where it's like, oh, okay, like, let's play in this energy. Let's like really, lean into what feels like it's going to expand me in the moment. So there's that. But then there's also, it's like, it's the same person before and after, like you were saying, where it's like, it's just like, it's kind of like people after my wedding were like, how do you feel? I'm like, exactly the same, except I'm not planning a wedding anymore. Like, got more free time, Right, so it was like, I feel like I'm the same person. But it was funny because it's like so many people, especially people that I'm like close to personally versus like even in the business world, were like, wait, like, you're doing something over here? And I'm like, yeah, I've been doing it for the last 5 years. And they're like, suddenly started taking it more seriously. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, but I've been doing this all along, but I'm grateful that whatever, it took for you to just recognize that, there's fun stuff happening over here, whatever that may be. They were the people that were, I think, I was surprised when they were leaning in being like, huh? Oh my God, you have a real job. And I'm like, what? Yes. Like, what are you talking about? Like, yes, it's real, so that was kind of funny to witness.
Yeah. And I also think of what you were saying too about the experience of the media coverage. And it also, I found for me, because I had like, years and years ago had some media coverage, but then I was just kind of busy doing my stuff. And it wasn't that I couldn't have gotten in the media. I just wasn't even paying any attention to that. I was focused on other things. And then you start to do the media thing. And I found for me, an interesting thing started to happen. I started to gain more clarity myself.
Yes.
About things, because when you get asked certain questions by the media in regards to whatever the particular piece is that they're working on, you like look at the response you give and you go like, oh, that's interesting that that's what I chose to share, or that's the direction that I took that particular topic in. Yes. And then the responses that I got from people from media coverage, some of the stuff, which, as you know, it's like you're one line in an article, right? It's not always like that, but there's times when you're one line in an article, they wanted an additional resource. You're the additional resource. They bring you in. So you're that one line in the article. It's not this gigantic piece, but again, the media association, and people would respond to it in a specific way. And I'd go, oh, it's interesting that that was the part that they took out of that, or that was why they thought that that was important. Which particular media companies they thought were really cool to see, as opposed to other ones that you thought. So it is a neat journey.
Yeah.
And a little tricky at times because you do want to make sure that you're remaining authentic to you. And because the media condenses down your message and only pulls out certain pieces, there are times where you're like, wait a minute, you can't share that sentence without the other sentence because that
Right.
sentence alone doesn't mean,
Right.
doesn't mean the same thing. So there is a lot of that that goes on. And I think the self-discovery through the media world has been interesting for me. And it sounds like for you as well, right? With the Forbes piece, like having people say things and you're like, huh, I didn't even realize that you didn't realize.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's been so, what I find like it just lights me up is that so many people said, wow, this is so inspiring that like people are starting to like have business and intuition start to coalesce
Mhm.
too. Like that to me, I just think it had a lot of people, especially people I used to work with too, were like, whoa, like this is really like inspiring. And like I read the article and I learned something new. And I'm like, I'm so grateful that, the two are colliding in a way
Yeah.
where it's like, I think for a very long time, like I was in marketing and it was so much about like data analytics. And it's like, what about the intuitive hit around like, I think that this, even though we don't have the data necessarily to back it up, could make a really powerful campaign. Where can the two kind of start to coexist? And so I thought that was really, it inspired me that other people were getting inspired to bring intuition into the conversation, like at the table with the client to say like, look, like here's something that I think would be really powerful to lean into. And then to just kind of watch the magic unfold. I feel like that's where the magic is when the two come together and allow for something really powerful to unfold.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think for as long as there's been business, right, for far longer than we're even aware of, right, for as long as there's been people making decisions about things to do together, those components have been part of it, right? Like
Mhm.
people have asked, like, what does your gut tell you, and those types of things, but they weren't recognized, right? Like we weren't.
Yeah,
So you're right. It's very much more so now. It's not just what are the uh, credentialed things that you have to have or
right.
degrees, etc. But what are some of the behaviors or characteristics of somebody that makes them able to be successful? And then we
Mhm.
help people tap into those and recognize those in themselves, right? That's great. I'm
Yeah.
glad you've got this degree in this, but like the last time you had to go through a difficult change, what was one of the things you found was really helpful to you? And people will tell me, and I'm like, guess what? You can use that here too. I know that
Yes.
that was just you maneuvering through like, a change in your friendship, but that will work in resolving conflict in your office as
Mhm.
well. And so,
So
like, kind of acknowledging that that stuff is important. For me, it was the kindness piece. I never really, I mean, I've been talking about kindness forever. I was talking about kindness when I was a teacher right out of college.
yeah.
That was something I used to teach about kindness, but
Mhm.
it wasn't really anything I ever would have put necessarily in a bio. It was
Mhm.
more of a character attribute. People would say stuff about like, oh, Deb's so kind, Deb's so nice. And it was like, oh, that's really cool. People would refer me because they enjoyed getting along with me. And then more and more, I would find people would actually be referring to me with the kindness part at the front, and then like, oh yeah, she's like really, really kind and does all this kindness stuff. Oh, and she also is like really great at strategy and process improvement. So I thought like, I've talked about it, but I've never really made it like an identifying feature. And so now it's become that like it's in on my LinkedIn profile. It's like you're saying, it's really awesome to have people reach out and be like, I love that you have kindness on your LinkedIn profile, right?
Exactly.
Like people saying to you, like, I love that intuition and being spiritually aligned and making sure that your
Mhm.
soul is comfortable with what you're doing. Not just like, how can I get the greatest profit,
Right.
but how can I, like, at the end of my life, be like really happy about the life that I lived?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, so I think yeah, that's really, amazing. What is now your child's 3, so
Mhm.
probably not totally aware of all these things going on. I'm sure that that's Forbes isn't, like, on their, bedtime reading list.
Mhm.
Do they have any comprehension of some of this stuff happening, like, in terms of
So it's really cute because I've been in Goss Manifest magazine, so I've
right.
gotten those in the mail, and then I'll open it up and he'll go, "Mama," so it's like he sees me and I don't think he's really aware of like he just looks, "Mama's in a book," it's kind of like what he's like thinking. So I think I don't really think he really totally understands it, but what I think is so fun is that so much of what I do in my business is how I show up for him too, is like
Yeah.
deeply present with both feet in, like allowing myself, like I don't have any of my notifications on my phone, for a reason, because it's like when I do drop into my text messages, you got me with both feet, and I'm going to go through every single one of my messages at that moment in time because I'm fully tapped in and dropped in. And that's how I am when I'm being a mom. The phone is off to the side. That's how I am with my clients. Phone is off to the side. So there's something to be said about the way that we do one thing is usually kind of like falling into the way that we do other things. So I think that's more of how he witnesses who I am and how I'm showing up, is just like by my presence, you know?
And that's essential too, because you're talking about doing it for your child, but also doing it for your clients, right? That like
Mhm.
we sometimes think, we meaning I'm sure there's other people who don't do this, but I sometimes think like, okay, well, I'm going to cover everything right now. So I'm like going to be tuned into everything right now and make sure like no fire goes, doesn't
Mhm.
starts that I don't recognize. I'm like, it's not effective. It's not
Mhm.
sustainable, right? Because
Right.
you cannot balance it all.
Yeah.
And then we don't get to be fully present in each of those moments. Because even the difficult things, when I've said I'm going to not focus on anything else that's going on right now, and I'm going to like, let's say that a client is going through a challenging situation, and it's not a happy situation. It's stressful, but when I'm really present in that, there's a peace that comes with it, because you're like, I know that we're going to work through this together. And I know that the
Mhm.
best thing I can do is not be trying to think about a happy thought to make me feel happy in the middle of the stress. It's for me to be very present in the stress, take the stress
Mhm.
in, use it to motivate the decisions we make in terms of recognizing like, okay, people are feeling really stressed right now,
Mhm.
and do that with our families. And I know for me, I've got to remind myself of that, because I do tend to want to multitask, because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I can like, I'm going to like, let's watch a movie tonight, guys. I'm going to bring my work computer in. And instead, I
Right.
should really be like, let me work for an hour more. Then we'll go watch a movie, so that I'm
Mhm.
giving both things that fully present time.
Mm. I did find I was doing the splits for a long time, where it was like one foot in this, one foot in that. And I'm like, oh man, like, why am I so exhausted when I'm meant to
Yeah.
be relaxing? So for me, it was a very like conscious decision around like, this is how I fill myself up so that I can be present even in my text messaging. You know, like that's
Yeah.
where people even when I'm responding on Instagram, you know, DMs or messages, like I'm there, you know, like I'm not like doing something else. And so I think that has been something where I'm like, okay, but I also follow my energy, where I'm like, do I feel communicative right now? Or can I place this off to the side and then do something else that's really aligning with my soul? So I think that's been really helpful, because it's filling me up as I'm going. It's like I'm
Mm,
getting my vitality back by honoring the season that I'm in, even during the day, where it's like, okay, this is the time where I really need to focus in on this. This is the time. And yeah, we have our scheduled things that we get to show up for no matter what. But in between those, that's where I really lean into what is my soul saying? What is my energy saying? And then I let that really guide how I lean in. You know, I have like three things
mm.
that I have to get done apart from my, you know, actual sessions. But then what do I want to do with my free time? I let my soul guide that conversation.
I like the term "the splits." I think that that's a really great term, because I think if we can use terminology like that when the moment's happening and we think
Yeah.
about it, like we think of what a split looks like. I
Yeah.
realize that if you're a gymnast or a dancer, a split's not a big deal. For me, if I tried to do a split, it's
Yeah.
not gonna do well for my body. So I think like using that symbol, right, for me to
Yeah.
think like when I start to do that, like, let me do this at the same time, like I'm splitting. Like you're
Yeah.
splitting yourself. You're
Yeah.
not allowing yourself to be there. And what you said too, which is really critical, is that like maybe right now is not the best time for me to do emails. Maybe right now is the time for me to, I don't know what the other tasks might be, do
Mhm.
laundry, right?
Yeah.
But like
Yes.
listen to like what is going to be helpful to me with where I'm at right now, because we only can control so much.
Yeah.
And this is kind of comical. I was looking because I realized I'm really red, and it's funny because our air conditioner is on the way out,
Hmm.
and it's just going to take a process to get the new air conditioning in. My home office is in an area of the house that like the air conditioner, even when it is working, doesn't always work well. The
Mm.
house was built in I think 96, which was during the housing boom, and there's just some quirky little things about it. So
Yeah.
this room is really hot right now, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because when we got on, I was like, oh, I've got like a heat headache. And I'm like looking at myself here, and I realized, I've been so focused. I'm like actually red. Like my body is actually hot right now. But I'm so focused. I'm like, maybe we need to like get another fan in here or something. But we do get so intent on what do
Yeah.
I need to do,
Yeah.
that we forget, how do I feel, and what parts of what I feel can I actually address right now? Right? I'm
Yes.
not going to make the air conditioner miraculously start working at this moment, but I could put another fan in here. I could maybe move to a different place in the house. but we cannot let the things that have to get done circumvent how we feel and our very real important presence in this world by our mere existence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's moments too where even when we do have the full calendar, we have the moments that bring us to our knees where we're like, and I get to clear that today.
Yeah.
Like when I had miscarriage, multiple miscarriages, every time that happened, I'm like, and I get to clear my calendar to process this out instead of pushing and showing up just because it's there. When we can really connect to how am I feeling in this moment, embody, like really step into the body and say like, okay, instead of just going, let me pause and connect to what do I need right now? Like you were saying, do I need some AC? Do I need something to drink? Do I need, because this vessel is housing our soul. We have to honor it too. And so just allowing ourselves to really connect into like, how can I be of service today? And I need to honor my body, my soul, nourish all parts of me to be able to show up and be of service. So really connecting into what will allow me to do that versus, again, doing the splits. I'm thinking about this, but I'm showing up anyways. It's like, how can I actually just pause in some instances, really show up for this so that I can 100% show up for this too.
Yeah. Whew, so much goodness there. All right. Well, first, because I want to definitely get a final deep thought that you can share with everybody. I can only imagine from all of the different things I know that you could provide deep thoughts on. But before we do that, can you tell everybody how they connect with you, whether they want to follow you on social media, whether they want to engage with your services? What is the best way for them to reach out and find out information about you?
So if you love listening to this long form, conversations, deep conversations like this, I have a podcast. It's called You Unlimited. It's this really powerful space where, 6, 7, 8-figure entrepreneurs come into the space and they share how they built what they built, how they failed building what they built. There's obviously a spiritual component to it, being a shaman. There's like, how to create miracles within your existence. I mean, granted, we're not controlling the miracle, but how can we follow our intuition such that it places us in a space where a miracle happens? So there's just so much fun over there so it's called You Unlimited. And so I would love for you to join me in that space. It's this beautiful mecca of just like wisdom. Every episode is so different, but so powerful. And you'll get a little taste by each of the titles, like what you want to lean into. So that place is really, really fun. You can find me on Instagram at I am Christina Deering. So I would love to play with you there. And LinkedIn, I'm just Christina Deering. Facebook, Christina Deering. But TikTok, I am at Christina Deering. Or at I am Christina Deering. So you can find me in all the spaces. But yeah, it's just so much fun to play in these different spaces, especially when we have more breathing room like this. Like these conversations are my favorite because we can go so much deeper than, a 60-second reel can.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I love leaning into this long form communication, just allowing people to really immerse and receive something. Because sometimes it's just a golden nugget, but it's like 20 minutes in, So
yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Even when I'm splitting up my long form sometimes and I'm like very present in the conversation with people, like it's interesting that like I could have 1,000 things going on when I log on to these calls, even on the days where I'm just like, oh, I'm packed in. I just go into the conversation and I'll still, when I'm listening back to the conversation, go like, oh yeah, it's like I hear it in a different way or it isolates it for me and it catches. So I too like the long form. And as I shared with you beforehand, like when people have asked me like, oh, what are the goals you have for your chats with that, Deb? And I'm like, just have cool conversations and let people hear them. I think like that's all that I really desire. I shouldn't say that's all, but that's what I desire from this. And I think anything else that it's going to serve or feed into, it will when it's supposed to, how it's supposed to. But in the meantime, let people hear stories and realize that like, we're all awesome. We're all awesome. And when we ask each other questions and listen to each other's awesomeness, it propels us forward, all of us collectively.
I totally agree. Yeah. It's like, because it allows us to go a little bit deeper on the iceberg. Like it's like we see just like this tiny little thing and we make all these assumptions. But then when we go in deeper in a conversation, we're like, oh my gosh, there's so much more depth here. Or I see more of myself here, the hidden parts. And then someone else is speaking about their hidden parts. And then we're like, whoa, like just the connection points that happen.
Yeah.
When we're all just sharing from our soul, it's like, it's just so connecting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a beautiful story and obviously you can only share snippets today, but so a final thought for everybody, and I always tell everybody, you can be funny, you can be deep, whatever moves you at this moment, that you'd like to leave everybody with?
Mm. So when I think about the journey to following my soul, I will say the thing that really helped me was tuning into my body and what my body was telling me, because I really lost myself checking all the boxes and doing all the things that made me the good girl, or the girl, the like mom loves me, dad loves me, like all the, yay. Like, and I just remember, at some point being in this career that checked all the boxes, but just feeling really empty. And so I went on this journey. And one of the things that has helped me so much in cultivating a life that's in alignment with myself was really connecting into, where does something feel expansive? Like when someone gives you an option, like to go to an event or to, take this class that maybe doesn't make sense to your friends, but it lights you up on the inside and you feel expanded by it, follow those breadcrumbs. They are literally pieces of your soul that are coming online because you feel the expansion, you feel that expanded energy, versus when someone gives you an option and feels like your throat is closing up or your stomach is in knots. Your body's telling you something there too. Start to really honor what your body is telling you, and these pieces will begin to fit together in a way that's going to make so much more sense. So if I could give people just one piece of advice, like let your body lead. And sometimes the way that we can do that too is like, I'll take a coin, and if I'm making a decision about something like, should I go on this trip? And it's like, everyone's going, but there's a part of me that's like, I just don't really want to go. Like, I don't know why, I just don't want to go. So I flip the coin, and like heads means go, tails means don't. And let's say it lands on heads, and I look at it and my body, my gut is like, ugh, I have a sinking feeling. That's my answer. It's not the coin. It's not the should. It's not the mind. It's the, how do you feel in your body when given the option, and connect to what that feels like in your, like really connect to what is your body telling you? Are you feeling a sensation of expansion? Are you feeling some constricting? And start to see where that takes you. I'm telling you, like the more that I honored what my body was telling me, the more that things started to fall into place that felt like miracles, that made no sense, And so I will say, like, just test it out, see how it feels. And like, that has been one of the biggest game changers in creating what I've created. Is if I had known it was going to be this 5 years ago, it might've scared me. So I just followed the little breadcrumbs instead and calmed my nervous system while I did it. So follow what lights you up, and then calm your nervous system around it, whether it's tapping, breathing, whatever that looks like, so that it normalizes the next step to get you to the next step, to get you to the next step.
Wow. Yeah. Powerful. I could dig into that, and I'm like, no, our time is up, Deb. Our time is up.
You're like, and let's start again. I would do it. I would be down. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. I'm certain there's going to be people that are going to reach out to you. I look forward to more developing with our continuing to cheer each other on and see each other grow. And obviously, as always, if there's anything I can do to help you. But thank you for being very present here today with us. And of course, thank you to the audience. And just a really wonderful conversation. But if you want to say goodbye to everybody, I don't want to click end stream till you have a chance. If you'd like,
I'm like, bye. You're like, eh. Well, seriously, Deb, thank you so much for just guiding this conversation, for bringing in humor and light, and for everyone that, tuned in. I hope that you received something really magical, or really like even that nugget, that one nugget. Maybe that's the thing you needed to hear today to get through whatever it is that you're going through. You're not alone in that. Just really connect to your heart and know that if you receive something that validated something you already kind of knew, let that be your sign from God, source, universe, like to follow what you just received. If it resonated with your body, that's a sign for you to follow that. So just for everyone who tuned in, to you, Deb, thank you so much for just holding this incredible space. I'm so grateful. And I'm so grateful to everyone who's here with us.
Thank you. All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.